The job posting had been perfect. Too perfect, Jamie thought now, standing in the employee break room at 11:47 p.m. on their first night shift. Overnight facility monitor, minimal duties, $28 hour, no background check beyond the basics, no interview beyond a phone call, no explanation for why the last 3 security guards had quit within a week. The Silver Lakes Community Pool Complex was a monument to suburban excess. Olympic-length main pool, children's splash zone, 3 hot tubs, all housed in a cathedral-like structure with skylights that transformed the space into an aquarium of light during the day. Jamie had swum here as a kid, remembered birthday parties and swim lessons, the scent of sunscreen mixing with chlorine, the sound of laughter echoing off tile. At night, it was something else entirely. The fluorescent lights hummed with a frequency that made Jamie's teeth ache. The chlorine smell wasn't refreshing anymore. It was oppressive, chemical, like standing in a laboratory where something had been preserved too long. The water lay perfectly still, a dark mirror reflecting nothing but the emergency exit signs that cast red shadows across its surface. The ceiling stretched up 30 feet, creating an acoustic void where every footstep, every breath, became amplified and distorted. Jamie checked the time, 11:53 p.m. 7 hours until dawn. 7 hours until the $224 that would cover this month's textbooks and groceries. The employee handbook had been minimal. Check the pH levels at midnight, walk the perimeter every hour, don't fall asleep. But something had been bothering Jamie since the manager, Mr. Hendricks, had handed over the keys with trembling hands. Just follow the protocols. If you find any protocols, they're not official but they're important. Former security left them. You'll know them when you see them. Jamie had laughed it off. Horror movie nonsense, urban legend workplace hazing.
Then, at 11:58 p.m., while changing into the required polo shirt in the men's locker room, Jamie noticed locker 47. It hung slightly open, rusted at the hinges, the kind nobody had used in years. The inside of the door caught the overhead light at just the right angle. Writing, looping, almost childish handwriting in permanent marker, pressed so hard into the metal that some letters had nearly punctured through. The Silver Lakes Protocol: follow these rules. Do not deviate. Do not ignore. Former security, 7 rules, numbered carefully, each one more specific and bizarre than the last. Jamie's stomach tightened as they read, pulled out their phone, and photographed the text. The fluorescent light flickered once, and in that moment of darkness, Jamie could have sworn they heard something. A wet sound, like fabric dragging across tile. The lights stabilized. The locker room was empty. Jamie looked at their phone. 12 a.m. exactly. The shift had begun. Second Rule 1, the Reflection Protocol, 1 a.m. The first hour passed in uneasy silence. Jamie walked the perimeter, tested door locks, tried to convince themselves that the rules were a joke, some elaborate prank by bored pool employees, the kind of thing people made up to scare the new hire. But at 12:50 a.m., standing in the equipment room with the ancient circulation pump rumbling like a mechanical heartbeat, Jamie pulled up the photo again. Rule 1, the Reflection Protocol, 1 m. The main circulation pump must be shut off at precisely 1 a.m. During the 5 minutes of stillness, do not look at the water. Keep your eyes on the floor. The reflection is not you. It has been waiting. Jamie's rational mind screamed that this was insane. The pump kept the water circulating, kept it clean, kept it safe. Turning it off violated every principle of pool maintenance. But something about the desperate pressure of those handwritten words, the way do not look, had been underlined 3 times. 12:58 a.m. Jamie's hand hovered over the pump's kill switch. This was stupid. This was... The fluorescent light above the pump flickered. Once, twice, Jamie hit the switch. The sound of the pump's death was unlike anything they'd expected. It wasn't a simple mechanical cessation. It was a gasp, a shuddering exhalation, as the water's constant movement, maintained for 16 hours of daily operation, suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. It was a silence that had weight, that had texture, that pressed against Jamie's eardrums like they were descending into deep water. Jamie stepped out of the equipment room and into the main pool area. The water, without the circulation system, had become absolutely, perfectly still. Not a ripple, not a wave, just a vast dark mirror that reflected the ceiling lights in points of cold brilliance. The instructions were clear. Do not look at the water. Jamie's eyes fixed on the tile floor. The chlorine-stained grout lines became their entire world. Cream-colored ceramic, with blue accent tiles every 6 feet, the pattern leading away from the equipment room toward the lobby. Their peripheral vision caught the edge of the pool, the chrome ladder rails, the gutter drains. Do not look at the water. 1 minute passed. Jamie counted heartbeats, 87, 88, 89. Their neck ached from staring downward. The urge to look was overwhelming, primal. Humans were wired to check threats, to verify safety, to understand their environment. Every instinct screamed to lift their eyes, to scan the pool, to confirm they were alone. 2 minutes. Jamie focused on breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The chlorine smell had changed somehow. It was sharper now, more astringent, with an underlying note of something organic, something like salt water and decay. 3 minutes. The silence was breaking down. Jamie could hear things now, not external sounds, but the sounds of their own body amplified by the acoustic void, the rush of blood through arteries, the wet click of their throat when they swallowed, the creak of their knee joints when they shifted weight, and then, underneath it all, breathing, not their breathing, someone else's breathing, wet and labored, the sound of someone who'd been underwater too long and was desperately trying to fill their lungs. Do not look at the water. Jamie's eyes stayed locked on the tiles, but their peripheral vision betrayed them. Movement at the edge of the pool. No, in the pool. A shape beneath the surface. No, not beneath. The reflection was wrong. The ceiling lights were reflecting properly, but there was something else in the reflection. A figure, standing at the pool's edge where Jamie stood, but inverted, looking up from the depths. 4 minutes. Jamie's hands were trembling. The shape in their peripheral vision was clearer now. It was them. Same height, same build, same polo shirt. But the reflection, Jamie's posture was wrong. Where Jamie stood rigid and terrified, the reflection was relaxed, arms hanging loosely at its sides. Where Jamie kept their eyes down, the reflection's eyes were open wide, white and staring, locked onto Jamie's position with absolute unwavering focus. The reflection raised one arm, slowly, palm up, reaching toward the surface as if trying to break through the barrier between water and air. Do not look at the water, do not look at the water, do not look. Jamie's eyes began to drift upward. They couldn't help it. The human brain was wired for mirrors, for symmetry, for meeting the gaze of something that looked like you. The reflection was an independent entity, a separate Jamie who had drowned in this pool in some other timeline, some other reality, and was now trapped beneath the surface tension, waiting for the circulation to stop, waiting for the stillness that would let it reach through. Beep, 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 the phone alarm. 5 minutes. Exactly 5 minutes. Jamie's hand shot out and slapped the pump's activation switch without looking up. The mechanical rumble resumed instantly, and with it came the sound of water beginning to move again. The reflection shattered into ripples and current. Jamie finally lifted their eyes. The pool was empty. Just water, now churning gently with renewed circulation. The surface was breaking up into thousands of small waves, each one catching the light differently. But at the bottom of the deep end, barely visible through 12 feet of water, Jamie saw something that made their breath catch. A handprint, pressed against the pool floor from underneath, fingers splayed, as if something had been trying to push through from below. The mark faded as Jamie watched, dissolved by the returning current. Jamie's legs nearly gave out. They caught themselves on the pool's edge, hand gripping the chrome rail, and realized their palm was slick with cold sweat. 1 rule down. 6 to go. 3rd. Rule 2. The lifeguard's post, 2 Jamie spent the next hour trying to rationalize what they'd experienced. Optical illusion. The lighting had created a weird effect. The handprint was just a shadow, or debris on the pool floor, or a trick of the water's refraction. The breathing sound was the pump's mechanism, or their own breath echoing strangely in the acoustic space. But their hands were still shaking when they pulled up the photo. At 1:55. Rule 2. The lifeguard's post, 2 a.m. Climb the tall lifeguard tower. Use the broken pulley system to raise the black flag on the pole while facing the pool's darkest corner northwest. Do not look away until the flag reaches the top. They will know you are following the protocol. Jamie had noticed the lifeguard tower during their initial walkthrough, a tall white wooden structure positioned at the pool's midpoint, elevated 15 feet above the deck. It had been empty for years, replaced by roving lifeguards at water level. The tower's chair was gone, leaving only the platform and the rusted pulley system that once held signal flags. A black flag hung on a hook at the tower's base, fabric heavy and stiff with age. At 1:58 a.m., Jamie climbed the ladder. Each rung was slippery with condensation, and the entire structure creaked under their weight, wood swollen with decades of moisture. By the time they reached the top platform, their calves were burning, and their breathing was heavy in the oppressive silence. The view was worse than they'd imagined. From 15 feet up, the pool looked infinite. The water stretched out in all directions, dark and vast, its surface reflecting nothing but the emergency lights that ringed the perimeter. The deep end, the darkest corner, northwest, was a pool of absolute blackness, the emergency exit sign above it casting a red glow that made the water look like it was filled with blood. Jamie's hands found the pulley rope. It was rough hemp, frayed and ancient, the kind of rope that should have been replaced years ago. The black flag attached to it was surprisingly heavy, fabric thick as canvas, and when Jamie began to pull, the pulley shrieked, metal on metal, a sound that echoed through the entire complex like a scream. They faced the northwest corner, the darkest corner, the void where the deep end descended to 12 feet, where the bottom was invisible, where anything could be waiting. The flag rose slowly, inch by grinding inch. Jamie's arms ached. The pulley fought every movement, as if something was pulling from the other end, resisting. 10 feet up, 11 feet, the black flag caught the air, but there was no air current. The pool complex was sealed, climate-controlled. No windows were open. No vents ran at night. The flag snapped in a breeze that didn't exist, fabric cracking like a whip, and Jamie's eyes stayed locked on the northwest corner as instructed. Even as every survival instinct screamed to look away, to climb down, to run, the flag reached the top of the pole. The pulley locked with a metallic click, and then Jamie saw it, a ripple. Starting from the exact center of the pool, a perfect circle of disturbance in otherwise still water. The ripple expanded outward in a ring, moving toward the pool's edges with geometric precision, not natural, not random, but calculated, purposeful. As the ripple passed the 15-foot marker painted on the pool's side, the water itself seemed to thicken. The surface developed a strange tension, like oil on water, creating rainbow patterns that had no source. And in that moment of altered surface tension, Jamie saw them, shapes, just beneath. Not swimming, not moving in any conventional sense, but existing in the space between surface and depth. Humanoid forms with limbs that were too long, torsos that seemed to fold in on themselves, heads that were smooth and eyeless but somehow aware. They weren't looking up at the flag, or at Jamie. They were looking at each other, acknowledging, confirming. They will know you are following the protocol. The ripple reached the pool's edge, and died. The shapes faded back into the depths. The water returned to its previous state, dark, still, waiting. Jamie's knuckles were white on the pulley rope. They counted to 10, then 20, making sure the entities weren't returning. Finally, they descended the ladder on legs that barely held their weight. The black flag remained at the top of the pole, hanging limp in the non-existent breeze, a marker that something old and patient had been acknowledged. Fourth Rule 3, the locker room anomaly. The walk to the women's locker room at 2:35 a.m. felt like descending into a throat. The corridor connecting the pool to the locker facilities was narrow, tile-lined, with motion sensor lights that flickered on with reluctant buzzing as Jamie approached. Rule 3, the locker room anomaly in the women's locker room. Locker 9 will be slightly ajar. Do not open IT further. Do not look inside. Leave your employee ID or personal keys on the bench outside the locker. When you return in 10 minutes, the item will be gone. The locker will be closed. This is the price of passage. Jamie had their employee ID in their pocket, a laminated card with their photo, name, and the Silver Lakes logo. It felt like giving up a piece of themselves, but the rules were explicit. The women's locker room was a maze of tile and metal, benches bolted to the floor in rows, shower stalls along the far wall. The motion lights triggered as Jamie entered, but several remained dead, creating pockets of shadow between the functioning fixtures. Locker 9 was in the third row. It was ajar, just barely. 3 inches of darkness between the metal door and its frame. Jamie's footsteps echoed as they approached. The locker room smelled wrong, Chlorine, yes, but underneath it something else, something organic and wrong. Salt water, Jamie realized. The distinct mineral smell of ocean brine, impossible in a freshwater pool 40 miles from any coast. And there was sound coming from Locker 9, coughing. Wet, desperate coughing, the sound of someone who'd inhaled water and was trying to expel it. Fabric moving against plastic, limbs thrashing in confined space. Someone was drowning inside the locker, had been drowning for a very long time, was still drowning in a space that couldn't contain a person. Do not look inside. Jamie's hands trembled as they pulled out their employee ID. The photo on it showed them smiling, taken during orientation 3 days ago, when this job had seemed like a blessing. They placed the ID on the bench directly in front of Locker 9, the card sliding across the painted wood with a soft hiss. The coughing stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. It was expectant. Waiting. Jamie backed away slowly, eyes locked on the locker. The door didn't move. The 3-inch gap remained constant, but Jamie could feel attention focused on them now, could sense something inside that locker becoming aware of their presence, evaluating, considering. They reached the locker room exit and fled. 10 minutes. The rule said to return in 10 minutes. Jamie spent those minutes in the lobby, pacing, checking their phone every 30 seconds. 2:42 a.m., 2:43 a.m., 2:44 a.m. Each minute felt like an hour. The employee ID had their address on it, their date of birth, a piece of identification that could be used to find them, to follow them, to 2:45 a.m. Jamie returned to the women's locker room. Locker 9 was closed. Completely shut, the metal door flush with its frame, the combination lock hanging undisturbed. The bench where Jamie had left their ID was empty, no card, no trace it had ever been there, but the smell remained. Salt water and chlorine, mixed with something else now, copper, blood. Jamie approached the bench slowly, reached out, touched the wood where the ID had been. Their fingers came away damp. They lifted their hand to the light. The liquid on their fingertips wasn't water. It was too thick, too dark. And when they brought it close to their face, the smell was unmistakable. Ocean water, the kind from very deep places where light never reached, mixed with the iron scent of old blood. Jamie wiped their hand on their pants and left the locker room without looking back. Behind them, they heard it, a single, soft sound, metal on metal, a combination lock being spun. 1 number, 2 numbers, 3 numbers. The lock opening. Jamie didn't stop to hear what came next. 5th Rule 4, the sound check. The next hour was supposed to be quiet. Jamie walked the perimeter, checked the pH levels, tried to scrub the sensation of deep ocean water from their fingertips, but the rules said nothing about the period between 3 and 3:30 a.m., and Jamie held on to that gap like a lifeline. 30 minutes of normalcy, 30 minutes to breathe. Rule 4, the sound check: do not break the water's surface tension accidentally. The swimmers are attracted to the sound of rescue. If water is splashed, immediately run to the maintenance hatch and play a single, loud, dissonant tone from your phone for 10 seconds. They will retreat. Failure means they come for you. At 3:17 a.m., Jamie was checking the storage closet near the children's splash zone, cleaning supplies on metal shelves, pool noodles hanging from hooks, the detritus of daytime joy stored in the darkness. They were backing out, not paying attention, when their foot caught the edge of a yellow maintenance bucket. It tipped, fell, hit the tile floor with a plastic crash, and rolled into the children's pool. Splash. The sound was small, insignificant. The bucket hitting 6 inches of water in the shallow wading pool, creating a ripple, disturbing the surface. But in the massive acoustic space of the pool complex, that single splash became monumental. It echoed off the high ceiling, bounced off tile walls, multiplied and amplified until it sounded like someone had done a cannonball into the deep end, like someone was thrashing, like someone needed help, like someone was drowning. The silence that followed was wrong. It was the silence of held breath, of paused predators, of things that had been waiting for exactly this signal. The swimmers are attracted to the sound of rescue. Jamie's mind went blank with terror, then snapped into focus. The maintenance hatch. Where was the maintenance hatch? Near the equipment room, behind the deep end, a metal panel set into the wall. Jamie ran. Their footsteps echoed like gunshots. Behind them, they heard it, water moving. Not the gentle circulation of the pumps, but the sound of something large displacing volume. Multiple somethings. The splash had called them, and they were rising to investigate, to find the source, to complete their archive drowning experience with someone new. The maintenance hatch was rusted shut. Jamie's fingers scrabbled at the release catch. Finally got it open. Behind the panel, pipes, valves, and the emergency speaker system that could broadcast sound throughout the pool complex. Phone. Where was their phone? Pocket, front pocket, fingers slipping on the screen. They needed sound, dissonant sound, loud and... Jamie pulled up a tone generator app. Frequency, 857 Hz. Volume, maximum. The frequency was chosen at random, desperately, but when Jamie hit play and held the phone to the speaker system's microphone input, the sound that erupted from every speaker in the complex was wrong. It wasn't music, it wasn't noise, it was something between frequencies, a sound that existed in the space human ears couldn't quite process. It felt like needles in the inner ear, like pressure behind the eyes, like the beginning of a migraine concentrated into audio form. Jamie's teeth ached, their vision blurred. They wanted to tear the phone away, smash it, end the sound, but they held firm. 10 seconds, the rules said 10 seconds. At the 5-second mark, something changed. Through the pain of the dissonant tone, Jamie heard splashing, major splashing, thrashing. Not the sound of something approaching, but the sound of something retreating. They turned, phone still blaring its horrible frequency, and looked at the pool. The water level had dropped. Impossible but undeniable. The surface had receded 3 inches from the pool's edge, leaving a high water mark of chemical residue on the tile. It wasn't draining. The water was pulling back, contracting toward the center, away from the edges, as if the entire volume was trying to get away from the source of the sound. 10 seconds. Jamie released the button. The tone cut off instantly. The silence that followed was different from before. It was empty. The presence, the attention, the things that had been rising from the depths, they were gone. Retreated. Waiting. Jamie's hands were shaking so badly they nearly dropped the phone. They looked at the pool's edge, at the 3-inch gap between water and tile, and watched as the water slowly, gradually, crept back up to its normal level. The surface sealed, the boundary restored. Jamie closed the maintenance hatch and slid down the wall to sit on the cold tile floor, breathing hard, trying not to think about what would have happened if they hadn't yet remembered the rule, if they'd been 5 seconds slower, if the tone hadn't been loud enough or dissonant enough, or they will retreat. The rules had been right. Former security had known, had experienced this, had survived long enough to write down the protocols. How many nights had former security lasted before they quit? How many nights before the rules stopped being enough? 6th Rule 5. The voice of drowning. Jamie almost missed it at 3:42 a.m., distracted by checking and rechecking the pool's edge, making sure nothing was disturbed, that the surface tension was intact. But then they heard it, their name called softly from the deep end, Jamie. The voice was weak, desperate, female, and heartbreakingly familiar. Jamie, please. It was their sister's voice. Emily, who was currently 300 miles away at grad school, who Jamie had talked to yesterday on the phone about their new job. Emily, who couldn't possibly be here, who couldn't possibly be in the pool, drowning in the deep end at 3:43 am. Rule 5. The voice of drowning. A voice will call your name from the deep end. It will sound like someone you know. You must only reply with the exact phrase, "The pool is closed," nothing else. Do not approach. Do not attempt rescue. It is not real. It is how they learn. Jamie, I can't keep my head up. The voice was coming from the 12-foot mark, where the bottom disappeared into darkness. Jamie's feet moved toward the deep end automatically, muscle memory from a lifetime of responding to distress calls, to people who needed help. It is not real. Please, I'm so cold. The water is so cold. Jamie, why won't you help me? Every word was perfect. Emily's slight lisp on the letter S, the way she breathed between phrases, the exact cadence of her speech when she was scared, when she needed her older sibling, when... It is how they learn. Jamie's throat closed. This was the worst rule yet, the cruelest. Because Jamie's instinct, their entire moral framework, screamed at them to run to the deep end, to extend the rescue hook, to jump in if necessary, because that was Emily's voice and Emily was drowning. And Jamie, I'm going under, please. I can see the bottom now. It's so far down. There are things down here. They're touching my legs. Jamie's hands clenched into fists, their jaw locked. They forced the words out through pure willpower. The pool is closed. Their voice echoed through the complex, flat and official and completely wrong for the situation. It felt like betrayal. It felt like murder. The voice in the deep end paused. For one terrible moment, there was only silence. Then it continued, but the tone had changed. It was no longer weak. It was clearer now, stronger, and it began to speak things that only Emily would know. Remember when I was 8 and I fell off my bike and you carried me home? Remember what you said to me? You said, "I've got you. I'll always have you." Remember when Mom died and we sat in the hospital parking lot and you held my hand and promised I'd never be alone? Remember the promise, Jamie? Remember the promise? Jamie's vision blurred with tears. Their feet took another step toward the pool's edge. "Do not approach. The pool is closed," Jamie said again, voice cracking. "Oh God, Jamie, they're pulling me down. I can feel hands on my ankles, so many hands, they're pulling me to the bottom. I'm going under. This is it. This is how I die. And you're just standing there saying the pool is closed." The voice dissolved into gurgling, choking, the sound of water filling lungs, of a person going under for the last time, every fiber of Jamie's being demanded. They move, act, save their sister. But it wasn't their sister. Couldn't be their sister. This was something else, something that had access to Jamie's memories, their fears, their deepest obligations. It was learning their psychology, finding their pressure points, preparing to use this information against them. It is how they learn. Jamie stood frozen, tears streaming down their face, as the drowning sounds continued for another 30 seconds. Gasping, thrashing, then silence. The deep end returned to its previous state, dark, still, empty. Jamie walked to the lobby, sat on the floor, and allowed themselves 2 minutes to cry. 2 minutes to mourn the betrayal of refusing a drowning person. 2 minutes to hate themselves, and the rules and former security and whatever dark thing lived in the Silver Lakes pool. Then they stood up, wiped their face, and checked the time. 3:47 m.m. The worst rule was coming next, 7th. Rule 6. The paradoxical sacrifice. 3:45 a.m. Jamie retrieved the brightest flashlight from the equipment room, a industrial spotlight used for pool maintenance, the kind that could illuminate the entire deep end. Their hands were steadier now. Shock had given way to grim determination. 4 rules survived, 3 more to go. They could do this. They had to do this. Rule 6. The paradoxical sacrifice. 3:45 a.m. Take the brightest flashlight and shine it directly into the deep end for exactly 60 seconds. Do not look away. Do not turn off the light before 60 seconds. This violates every safety protocol. Do it anyway. The light is not a weapon. The light is attacks. They must see you see them. At 3:45 a.m. exactly, Jamie stood at the deep end's edge and pointed the spotlight down into the water. For the first 5 seconds, the light revealed only what should be there: blue tile walls, depth markers painted in black, the drain grate at the bottom. The water was clear, empty, normal. Then the deep dwellers came. They rose from the drain, from the darkness below the drain, from a space that couldn't exist but clearly did. They didn't swim. They ascended, moving through the water with a grace that defied physics. Their forms became clearer as they approached the light. Humanoid, barely, arms and legs that were too long, joints that bent at wrong angles, torsos that seemed to fold and unfold, rib cages visible through skin that was the color of drowned flesh, heads that were smooth and eyeless, but mouths that hung open, revealing throats that went down and down and down into impossible depths. There were 7 of them, maybe more. They moved in a group, oriented toward the light, toward Jamie. Their eyeless faces tilted upward. They must see you see them. Jamie's hand trembled. The spotlight wavered, creating dancing shadows in the water. The deep dwellers paused, 20 feet down, their attention locked on the light source. On Jamie. They spread out slowly, forming a circle in the water, limbs drifting as if in slow current. 15 seconds. Jamie's arms ached from holding the heavy spotlight. Sweat ran down their face despite the cool air. The deep dwellers were absolutely still now, arranged in their circle, waiting. 30 seconds. One of them moved closer, its 2 long arms extended, fingers spreading wide, each digit twice the length it should be. It reached toward the light, not aggressively, but with something like reverence. Or hunger. The light is attacks, Jamie understood suddenly. This was payment. The entities demanded acknowledgement. They had been drowned people once, or memories of drowned people, Residual experiences trapped in the water. They wanted to be seen. Wanted proof that they still existed, that their deaths mattered. 45 seconds. The nearest deep dweller was now only 8 feet below the surface. Its mouth opened wider, and from that throat came a sound, not a voice, but a tone. Low and resonant, like someone humming underwater. The others joined it, creating a chord that made the water vibrate, that made the pool's tile walls hum in sympathy. Jamie's arms were shaking violently now. The spotlight's beam wobbled, but they held it steady enough. The deep dwellers' faces stayed tilted upward, bathing in the light, absorbing it, feeding on the attention. 55 seconds. The nearest entity's hand broke the surface tension. Just the fingertips, creating small dimples in the water, but not breaking through. The fingers spread wider, impossibly wide, as if trying to encompass the entire spotlight beam. 60 seconds. Jamie dropped the light and stumbled backward. The spotlight fell to the pool deck but stayed on, beam pointing up at the ceiling now. In the sudden absence of direct light, the deep dwellers descended, not retreating, but returning to their positions, sinking back toward the drain, folding back into the darkness from which they'd come. The last thing Jamie saw before they disappeared completely was the nearest one's hand, still partially above water, fingers slowly curling into a fist, not threatening but acknowledging, confirming. The tax had been paid. Jamie had survived. For one more hour. 8th Rule 7, the drainage protocol, the final loop, at 5:55 a.m. With dawn beginning to lighten the skylights above, Jamie approached the final rule with exhausted relief. Almost over, almost done. Just this last task and they could clock out, go home, sleep for 12 hours, and decide if $28 hour was worth ever coming back. Rule 7, the drainage protocol, the final loop, before clocking out at 6 a.m., use the drainage valve to remove exactly 1 gallon of pool water into the rusty bucket in the equipment room. Pour this water down the street drain outside. Do not pour it anywhere else. This completes the cycle. The rusty bucket was where former security had noted, tucked behind the chemical storage, old and stained with mineral deposits. Jamie found the drainage valve, a small petcock on the main pool circulation system, and began the careful process of filling the bucket. The water that came out was wrong immediately. It should have been clear chlorinated pool water. Instead it was thick, not quite viscous, but heavier than water should be, and it glowed, faintly, just enough to be visible in the equipment room's dim light. A bioluminescent blue-green, like deep-sea organisms, pulsing gently with its own light. 1 gallon, exactly. Jamie closed the valve and lifted the bucket. It was heavier than a gallon of water should be. They carried it through the quiet pool complex, past the still water and sleeping demons, out through the front doors into the pre-dawn air. The street drain was across the parking lot, a standard gutter drain with a metal grate. Jamie knelt beside it, lifted the bucket, and poured. The sound that emerged was not water hitting concrete. It was a breath. A long, gasping inhalation, as if the drain were a mouth and the strange water was life itself. The glowing liquid vanished into darkness, and for just a moment, Jamie heard voices, multiple voices, overlapping, all saying the same thing. The pool is closed. The pool is closed. The pool is closed. Then silence. Jamie stood, holding the empty bucket, and allowed themselves to believe it was over. They'd survived. 7 rules, 7 hours, done. They could. The phone in their pocket buzzed. A notification. Impossible. There was no Wi-Fi this early, no cell service in the parking lot. But the phone insisted. One new email, sent at 6 a.m. exactly, from former_security@silverlakes.pool subject, protocol update. Jamie's hands went numb as they opened it. The email contained no text, just an attachment. A photo of the inside of locker 47, of the rules, of an 8th rule, freshly written below the others in the same looping childish hand. Rule 8, the WET towel. If the lifeguard's towel is wet at 6 a.m., your shift is not over. Return to the pool. The deep dwellers are not satisfied. Repeat from Rule 1. Jamie's breath caught. The lifeguard's towel. There had been a towel on the tower's platform when they'd climbed it at 2 a.m. They'd barely noticed it, just a white rectangle of fabric folded on the railing. They'd been too focused on the black flag, on the entities in the water, on surviving. The phone buzzed again. Another email. Same sender. Subject, check the towel. Jamie looked up at the pool complex. Through the glass doors, they could see the main pool area. The lifeguard tower stood tall and white in the growing dawn light, and hanging from the railing, clearly visible even from this distance, was the towel. It was dark, saturated, dripping. Jamie's legs moved automatically, carrying them back toward the entrance. This wasn't possible. The email wasn't possible. The rule couldn't have appeared while they were outside. They'd photographed the locker at midnight, and there had only been 7 rules. 7 rules that former security had written before quitting, before leaving, before their shift wasn't over. Jamie pushed through the doors. The chlorine smell hit them with renewed force, but underneath it now was that saltwater scent, stronger than before. The smell of deep ocean, the smell of things that had been down in the dark too long. They approached the lifeguard tower slowly. The towel hung from the railing, sodden and heavy. Water dripped from it in a steady rhythm, creating a small pool on the deck below. Drip, drip, drip. Jamie reached out, touched the fabric. It was ice cold, and the water that came away on their fingers wasn't chlorinated pool water. It was brine, salt water, ocean water from depths where pressure could crush steel and light had never reached. A sound behind them. Footsteps, wet footsteps on tile. Jamie spun around. The pool was empty. The water was still. Nothing had emerged, but there, on the tile deck between Jamie and the exit, were footprints. Wet footprints. Bare feet, adult-sized, walking from the deep end toward the lobby. The prints were fresh, still glistening, leaving a trail that led to the locker room, the women's locker room, where locker 9 would be waiting. Jamie's phone buzzed. They didn't want to look, didn't want to see what new message had arrived, but their hand moved on its own, lifted the screen. From former_security at silverlakes.pool subject. I tried to leave too. The email was longer this time. Actual text. I made it to my car once. Made it all the way home. But at 6 a.m. the towel was wet, and I could smell the salt water in my apartment. I could hear them breathing in my bathroom, in my shower, anywhere water collected. They followed me. The only way to keep them in the pool is to complete the cycle. All 8 rules. Every night. When the towel is wet, the cycle isn't complete. I'm sorry. I should have warned you better. I should have told you the truth. The job isn't overnight security. The job is containment. The deep dwellers need a witness, someone to acknowledge them, to pay the taxes, to maintain the protocols. Without the protocols, they expand, they spread. They find other water, other pools, other bathtubs and sinks, and glasses of water on nightstands. You have to go back inside, Jamie. You have to start over. Rule 1 begins at 1 a.m. tomorrow night. I lasted 47 nights before I broke. Before I ran during Rule 5 because the voice was my daughter's and I couldn't stand it anymore. The moment I violated the protocol, they were released. I'm writing this from a hotel room 90 miles away, but I can hear them in the pipes. I can see them in the mirror when the bathroom steams up. I can't run far enough, but you can keep them contained. You can be stronger than I was. You have to be. The Silver Lakes pool must always have a witness. I'm sorry. Marcus Hendricks, former security, current manager. Jamie's hands went numb. Hendricks, the manager who'd hired them, who'd said follow the protocols with trembling hands, who'd known exactly what this job entailed. The wet footprints were multiplying. More sets now, coming from the pool, walking in different directions. Some headed toward the locker rooms, some toward the equipment room. One set walked directly toward Jamie, getting closer, closing the distance. Jamie ran, not to the exit. They tried the exit first, but the doors wouldn't open. Locked from the inside, the electronic system disabled. The glass was too thick to break. The emergency exits were sealed. The pool complex had become a cage. Jamie's only choice was the equipment room, the one place that felt safe, where they could think, where they could The phone buzzed again. From former.security.silverlakes.pool subject, protocol for Rule 8. The wet towel means they're not satisfied with tonight's witness. You made a mistake somewhere, a hesitation too long, a look you weren't supposed to give. I don't know what you did wrong, Jamie, but they know. Rule 8 protocol, you must stay until tomorrow night. You must complete the full cycle again, 1 a.m. through 6 a.m. If the towel is still wet at the end of the second cycle, you must complete a third, and a fourth, until the towel is dry, until they're satisfied. There's food in the break room, water in the cooler, enough for several days. I once went 6 cycles in a row. 6 days. The longest anyone's lasted is former security. 17 cycles. When they finally left, the pool was closed for a month. 33 people drowned in bathtubs across 3 states that month. The correlation was never proven. The pool reopened. Someone new took the job. You're someone new, Jamie. Make the towel dry, or join us. Jamie looked at the time, 6:14 a.m. They had 19 hours until 1 a.m., 19 hours to prepare for Rule 1 again, to face the reflection, to climb the tower, to hear Emily's voice drowning. They walked to the lifeguard tower and looked up at the wet towel. It dripped steadily, each drop hitting the tile with a sound like a heartbeat. Drip, drip, drip. Somewhere in the pool, something moved beneath the surface, waiting, patient. The deep dwellers had all the time in the world, and now, so did Jamie. The end of night 1.